Greetings, Warriors! Back with another episode of Vigor Warriors 2 and the 1% Club. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys are on your purpose. And hope things are working for conquest, mainly of yourself and controlling all the things around you by controlling yourself first. Thank you guys for all the comments, likes, donations. I appreciate those a great deal. Hope you guys are all keeping on your plan, as we said before. I'm gonna put as I usually do, put a bunch of shout outs in the description, but a couple I want to mention real fast. Amhauri Mohammed, greetings from Morocco, my friend. Hope you guys are enjoying the broadcast, and hope you guys are continuing to stay on your purpose as well. And our friend Herbst, ST888. My friend, hang in there. You were talking about needing some help. I'm going to eventually try to do something where I can kind of interact with you guys more often, like streaming or kind of just having an open chat, things like that. I get the feeling that's probably a better way in some ways to communicate. But because of my schedule, it's just very difficult to do that right now. But I will try to find some times this next year to try to do that. But all I can say, my friend, is to continue to work at taking it one step at a time. I think one of the things you talked about was the video call apps, and we're going to talk about that one in a separate type of broadcast. But you have to kind of find the areas that you're most vulnerable with. And I repeat, I think I said that in a previous type of video when we talked about releasing. You have to kind of identify where the weakness is. That we all have weaknesses. Where is our weaknesses at? And avoid those. Even if you've got to take it one step at a time, find something else to do with your time. Get some hobbies, exercise, find something with work if you have to, whatever it might be, to get away from thinking about the women or talking to the women until you can get it better under control. And hopefully that will help you a little bit to kind of get an idea. But we're with you, my friend. Keep battling every day. Keep battling every day. All right, so today's topic, we're going to talk about one that I was submitted by, I think, Bobbi gave this as a topic. And this is an interesting one because he's asking me about, do women have the same urges of intercourse and things like that? I think this is a very fascinating topic. I think it's important because we want to talk about how men can relate and understand women to an extent, and do women also have semen retention? And so I think that'll be what I'll kind of talk about. This is women and semen retention, and kind of talk about this more as well. So, do women have semen retention? Well, of course, we all have semen retention. Obviously, we have different parts of this. Do we call semen retention? Well, probably not. But there's retention that women have as well, right? Because obviously they have the same type of needs and things that occur that men do. However, a lot of times I think men prescribe the same things they have to women, and women do the same thing to men, not realizing there's fundamental differences. I've always found it kind of ironic that as time has gone on, I've learned a lot of differences with men and women. And so it's interesting to me that when women are younger, now this is not every woman, obviously, but traditional types of generalizations, which are dangerous, of course, but generalizations is that when men are in their 20s, a lot of times their sexual peak is very high. A lot of times women, when they're in their 20s, really don't have as much of that because they're thinking about it obviously in terms of having children, and yes, they're going to have that enough of that to be able to say, okay, let's procreate and have children, things like that. But they also have a lot of retaining themselves, and so they're really more focusing on having children for the sake of the family, and their drive is not as great at that point in time as a male is. Now, as males, as we get older, a lot of males, except for the ones in our 1% club, of course, kind of lower and lose their sexual types of powers and things, and their drive, While women, especially after they get through menopause and all that, sometimes they tend to create a lot of sexual drive. And I've met a lot of women in their, early 50s who have an unbelievable sexual drive. Now, the interesting thing about this, however, is that it's kind of the flip opposite, right? Women tend to have their greatest types of needs, but when men are looking at, they don't have their needs at their 50, but when they're younger, men are really ready to go, and women tend not to have as much of that, or focusing more on the family types of things to that. And of course, this is a lot of generalization too, and I always kind of get myself in trouble doing this, but when you look at this, the question that Bobbi had is, do they have strong urges? Well, of course they do, but at different points in time for different reasons. And I think a lot of us can kind of agree with that statement, that lots of times it depends on the situation you're dealing with. A lot of times women in their 20s, because they have a lot of options, because they're young, and obviously they're fertile, and they're at the point where males are interested in them, they're not thinking so much about their desires. And of course, there's exceptions to this, of course, but they're thinking about having children. And so they're looking for that kind of intercourse as a means of procreation. They may not be looking at that in the sense of doing it. Now, the younger generation, this may be different, of course, but I have not seen that, especially a lot of the courses that I've taught, talking with, women in the college arena and older. I've still seen the same type of tendencies I've always seen. It may be a little bit different in some ways, but the thing is that when you're talking about this, a lot of times the men are the ones who really want to have, procreation, especially with younger females, because they look more attractive in their 20s, until they start hitting the wall in the 30s, and men don't really desire them as much as they used to. And so it's a very interesting type of dilemma when you're looking at this, is that it just seems like that, it in some ways it's kind of strange to me how it actually even works out, because a lot of times women, they're not as sexually active. Well, that's wrong. They're not as they are in their 40s and 50s, especially later on. But the times where they're trying to have kids, of course, is when they're in their 20s. And so a lot of times the men who are very sexually oriented, especially in the 1820s, they don't tend to have the options because they have not fully established. And so it's really kind of a ironic type of twist there to look at. And so, yes, I think as far as, the question goes, yes, of course, they have strong desires. And I have met a lot of women who have very strong desires, but at different parts of their life, they have different desires. And so it is, once again, an interesting type of dilemma to kind of look at. Now, why is it important for the men in the audience here? Well, of course, understanding women, again, understands the relationship you have with somebody. I think certainly knowing that women sometimes get a very strong sexual need when they're in their 40s and 50s, and if you happen to be married to one, that's coming. That's going to happen. But a lot of men who are not ready to go, at that point in their 40s and 50s and 50s and 60s especially, they struggle with that. And so they're not really ready to meet the needs of the female at that point. Now, how does it affect retention? Well, of course, if you're doing the retention, you're not releasing, then you're also trying to find ways to also kind of make sure, if you're in a marriage, to meet your wife's needs, but also not releasing on your own end of it. So that's a really, especially in types of monk modes and things like that, a big dilemma that married men run into. However, I think once again, as you look at these type of things, you're kind of balancing all this out and making choices depending on the situation you're in. But knowing when women are also active or having some idea makes things a little bit easier for the male to understand this as well. This is why it's such a hard thing for young males in their 20s, because this is the time that males really want to kind of procreate and find women. But a lot of times, because they're not secure enough in their job positions, females are looking for somebody a little bit older, especially who are established. And a lot of men in their early 20s are not established yet, and so they don't have the potential for protection and providing those type of things. And so as you look at this, obviously, a lot of this is, I'm generalizing a lot, and I'm always dangerous when I generalize too much. But I think the thing is that women have the same type of needs that men do. They just have different types of needs at different points in their life as well. And it's very much of a crazy paradox we run into. That's why it's always surprising to me that we can have, that we even have children at all, because people are different odds and parts of life, and they come together to have children, which I think is very, very fascinating type of thing. And that's why when you look at men and women, men, because they can have, they can actually procreate into their 90s and 100s if they really wanted to, if they were going to stay alive that long, can find women in their 20s and still have a child, which is the craziest thing in the world when you think about it. But in another sense, the sperm is still the sperm, and it doesn't really die. And so women, as long as they're fertile enough, can have a child at any point they want. So I think it's very, very fascinating type of issue to talk about. But I think certainly the key thing to answer Bobby's question here is that yes, women have very strong sexual desires. From my interview, now, of course, I'm not a woman, but understanding what women have told me, they have very strong sexual desires. But it just depends on the situation, what their goal is out of it. If they want to have children, they're looking for a whole different type of thing when it comes to a male as compared to when they're older, looking for different types of things at that point in time as well. But regardless, remember that a lot of this goes back to your decisions of who you really want to be with and your plan and overall goals. So, all right, guys, hope this helps answer the question. I probably kind of didn't do this justice enough. We may want to talk about this one a little bit later at some point as well. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the day and have a great day. And remember, every day is a new day to a wise warrior. God bless you guys, and battle on.